On a visit to northeastern Greenland this summer, what first caught my eye were the icebergs, each of which was like a gigantic piece of art. But when I met Arctic researcher Mi Vinding, it was not to talk about icebergs, but to learn about the microscopic creatures that inhabit this icy sea.
So I work with all the small animals in the ocean, all the ones you really can't see or think about. I think when you ask most people about marine life, they think about whales or fish or dolphins and all these bigger things. But I think actually the most amazing life in the ocean is all the small ones.
They say that 9/10 of an iceberg is hidden underwater. In a way, this is also true of the biomass of the ocean, 90% of which is microscopic plankton, almost invisible to the naked eye. But it is these minute organisms that convert the energy of the sun into nutrition that feeds the millions of species that inhabit our seas.
The zooplankton feed on the phytoplankton, and then all sorts of things are feeding on the zooplankton. So actually, zooplankton is extremely important because they link the phytoplankton, so where you get the energy from the sun, to bigger animals in the food chain. And then here in the Arctic, we have different kinds of zooplankton. And what is really important is that we have the Arctic ones up here. So the Arctic zooplankton is full of fat. And that's why a whale wants to swim all the way from Caribbean up here, is to eat this fatty zooplankton.
During the past 50 years, the annual average temperature in the Arctic has risen by more than 3 degrees Celsius, in contrast to the 1 degree increase for the planet as a whole. This relatively rapid warming is driving complex environmental changes.
The problem is that the species change, the species competitions change. So even though the phytoplankton keep growing, there's still a limit for how much they grow. They not only use sun as energy, they also need nutrients. And fjords like this fjord, they will be nutrient limited. So really fast, the phytoplankton will use up all the nutrients in the water column, and then they can't grow anymore. So even though there's sunlight available, they can't grow because they don't have the nutrients to grow off. And then the zooplankton will feed on it. So you kind of have a completely different food chain than what you normally saw when the water was colder.
What was absent during the short summer of 2021 was sea ice. This, according to scientists, has many and far-reaching effects, not least of which is accelerated warming due to the loss of white reflective surface area, the so-called albedo effect.
But like with the sea ice, the timing of the sea ice was so steady in this fjord early on. You could almost set the alarm clock after it. But now it's just there's a month in between when the sea ice comes off boat. And that's have a huge impact on the fjord system. One of the fishermen said it's like the seasons have tilted. That normally you knew how the ice would behave, and that you can't say anymore because the variability is just so huge. You use all these buzzwords in the media to make awareness about a problem, because climate change is a problem and we need to do something about it, but it's also so big that you can't really relate to it. So you need all these buzzwords to get people's attention, I think. So the trends we see is that the variability is getting bigger. When it first starts, it's kind of a rolling ball, right? It just keeps on going. So, of course, we're seeing here in Greenland, we see new species coming in our waters. So we haven't had mackerel for many years, and then suddenly the mackerel comes back, and we can actually catch the mackerels again. And that's quite important for our economy, but then it's disappeared again. So nature will always have these variabilities going up and down. And you kind of need to see the bigger picture in the changes which are there.
Me and her fellow researchers from the Greenland Ecosystem Monitoring Program have been coming to Danneborg Research Station every summer for the past 23 years. And the one trend they clearly observe is the retreat of the glaciers. So-called ocean-terminating glaciers, which nourish the fjords with clean, nutrient-rich water, are retreating and becoming land-terminating. A change that has the opposite effect. The muddy meltwater that runs off these makes the water murky and restricts the sunlight that feeds the production of the all-important phytoplankton, which is essential to all life in the sea.
And we can see some of the glaciers during the years we have been here, because we have been here 25 years. We have glaciers coming down at the side of the mountains. We can see these glaciers is retracting as well. They are getting smaller every year. And the same with the glacier in the next bay. That one ended in the water column in the beginning of the program. It doesn't do that anymore. It's ending on land now. So as these glaciers retract, the fjord system will change as well. And that's why it's so important to kind of know how the two different fjord systems behave. And one of the things when working with climate change is that you need more than 30 years of data to say if it's climate change or it's just variability. Last year was a really warm summer, but that doesn't mean it's climate change. That could just be the variability within. And that's the reason for we are coming back year after year, measuring the same thing year after year to get these long data series. So these things are changing, but life, animals, humans, we are quite resilient and able to adapt to new circumstances. So I think a lot of things is not doomsday yet, I think.
As I explore the extraordinary mini ecosystem that each glacier supports, I'm struck by the thought that this is now an island of life in a vast ocean. And I hope that Mivending is proved right, and that this beautiful place is sufficiently resilient to survive the changes we are witnessing.